Hello and welcome to the premiere episode of the Highway Robbery Podcast. I'm your host Kelly Black, and today we'll be covering the following topics. Who is the Highway Robbery Group and why do they exist? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why is this important? And what can you do about it? First, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Nestor Mryglot, the leader of the Highway Robbery Group, a man of endless determination. Nestor has achieved considerable success running Super Seamless of Canada, and over the years, Nestor and his family have built a large steel siding manufacturing facility which serves clients all across North America. Nestor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kelly. Glad to be here.
Tell us, Nestor, who is the Highway Robbery Group and why does it exist?
About 4.5 years ago, we started a group called the Y Tower Road Group to challenge the government on the location of the Regina bypass that affected our business. We asked a lot of questions. We wrote a lot of letters. We tried to get answers onto the why Tower Road. What was the science behind their decision? We didn't get a lot of good answers back, a lot of things that we could really understand why our 35-year-old business was being impacted, and a lot of our neighbors were also losing their homes, their businesses, their land. So we continued to ask questions. We wrote many letters to every department in government, the Premier, Department of Highways, the City of Regina, to anybody we thought we could get an answer on a simple question: what was the science behind the decision to build the Regina bypass in city limits that impacted thousands of people, that was not the best plan to get heavy truck traffic around the city. We continued our letter writing to the point where the only meaningful answer we got back from the government was it was the engineers that decided where it should go. So we interviewed engineers. We decided they must have been the people that are responsible for this irresponsible decision. And the engineers told us they didn't agree with the route. They said their mandate was to study only how to get from Tower Road to Pinkie Road. They said that it was the developers that influenced the decision. So we continued with our plan to get accountability in government. We tried to engage more people. We did a lot of public awareness, writing letters to the editor, advertising in the local media, which happened to be the only paper that would really take our advertising was the White City Star magazine. At first they did a lot of our advertising and then became reluctant to because there was pressure from certain people that lived in the area that didn't want the information to come out. So
is this a protest group, antagonistic group? Is this someone pointing the government with sharp sticks? Or is it more about public awareness, getting people involved in the process of democracy and raising ethical questions of the government?
We're a nonpartisan group. We have people from all walks of life that are part of our organization that have done some good work in trying to raise public awareness. We have tried to get the government to, in the beginning, is to get them to give this a second sober look as to where the location should be, because it didn't make any sense that they would move it 400 meters off of Tower Road when back in 2012 it was the preferred route. And suddenly, after land developers bought land, 640 acres in total off Tower Road in 2012, the plan changed by one simple meeting that we were never invited to on May 6th to 9th, 2013, that none of our neighbors who lost their homes, their land, and their businesses were not invited to. Just the elite people along Tower Road, the City of Regina, the government, the RM of Sherwood, only they were invited to. And then suddenly at the very first public open forum in June 2013, which we attended, we discovered we were going to lose our land. We were going to lose our property, our access. And so we started asking a lot of questions at those meetings. Everybody at the meeting was totally against the location. They thought, if you're going to move it 400 meters, why didn't you move it 2 miles to Gravel Pit Road, which was outside the city? You didn't have to deal with railroad tracks. You could have gone north and south around the city, and that was the plan of a bypass, is to direct traffic to where it needs to go. And just so happens the industrial area of the city is in the northeast, and there's only one business in the south, and they could have easily gone off Gravel Pit Road north and south around the city, but there was one little problem. And we contacted anybody that was impacted. We spent thousands of hours writing letters, trying to get information from the government, and any stakeholders that were involved did not agree with the route. Even stakeholders that could have influenced the decision for the government to move the bypass to where it should have gone. But we were met with a lot of resistance from everybody in the area, mainly the large companies that were in the area that could have helped with our group to hold the government to account. Their main reason was they said they didn't agree with the route, but they did business with the government. So they couldn't get involved with us to try to meet with the government to move the bypass to where it should go.
So, families have had their homes bulldozed, little old widows being forced to live in a trailer, dirt has been moved, structures have been built. It's a little late to close the barn door now, the horses have gone. What exactly?
Well, they're not going to put the dirt back. What we need to do is to get a public inquiry into the Regina bypass. They do public inquiries on other things. They did a public inquiry on the arm of Sherwood. For what? Well, they needed to, because they needed to get the Reeve out, because he did not agree with the location of the Regina bypass. But the only way they could move forward with it is to get him out, because 80% of the land was in the arm of Sherwood. And he wouldn't have signed off. So they did a ruse. They got him out, they did a public inquiry, spent about $1 million, and then they bring in a lawyer from the city, Neil Robertson, to shepherd it through the arm of Sherwood. So that's the only reason why they got it through where they did. And that's the connection between Tower Road and the GTH. And that's a story that needs to come out. They need to do a judicial public inquiry. They need to do a forensic audit and a complete RCMP investigation in the entire Regina bypass, where you see long-term land, home, and business owners getting a fraction of the value, between 5 and 80 times less for their land. Now, how is their land worth any less than a developer that just recently bought it? For instance, Long Lake bought 500 acres for $6 million. That's $12,125 an acre.
Now, you mentioned families have been affected by this bypass. How has your family been affected by this entire bypass debacle?
Well, we had a lot of stress in our business. We, as you know, any business, just to stay in business, needs to spend a lot of their time doing business. This came up because our expansion plans were destroyed. We were planning to expand our business outside the city. We bought land off Tower Road in 2005. We were approved to build in 2010. We were midway through our construction of our first building, 1 out of 4, when we discovered that we were going to lose our access. As a result of the stress, my sister, who really championed the cause, spent probably 5,000 hours researching, talking to people, coming up with a lot of the correspondence and letters and things that we did initially to deal with the government and trying to get answers. She had a life-threatening stroke in 3 years ago. I attended the Premier's dinner because the Premier wouldn't meet with me. And I wrote him many letters, and it was never convenient for him. He said his schedule doesn't allow for him to meet. So I attended the meeting at his Premier's dinner, and I had a letter with me. I met with him, and he was quite irate and threatened me at the Premier's dinner. My sister, we were just finishing off a letter to him a couple weeks later, and she collapsed in my arms. had a major stroke, went into a coma. She's now paralyzed on half her body in Wascana. She didn't deserve that. She only tried to help, hold the government to account, and it's really impacted our family.
How has this affected your neighbors?
Well, that's a crazy story too. Two of our immediate neighbors lost their homes. They got paid a fraction of the value. They didn't have any really say in it. They came to him with expropriated values that they used from appraisals that they had. One neighbor, he ended up having to settle because they came to him on a Friday and they gave him about half the value what he should have got for his home, and they told him, if you don't settle by Monday, we're going to expropriate your land. So here we have a 71-year-old gentleman who has prostate cancer. What are you going to do? You say, no, I'm going to fight? He had to give in. So he got less than half the value that others are getting that had bought land recently. He'd been there 43 years, built his home, his family, beautifully landscaped area. But he was bullied, like everybody else who didn't accept the government's value. And some of them had to give in, like another neighbor, he had a heart attack in the midst of all of this, and they destroyed his house. They gave him half the value. So they ended up, the people that resisted, they ended up going to mediation, because the government makes them sign a confidentiality agreement. Now you say, why would this not be public knowledge? Well, the government doesn't want people to know that people are only getting a fraction of the value for their homes and in their property, because they would be quite upset by that. So owners, in fact, I can't even get the value what my neighbor got for his property because he signed an agreement. So how fair is that? If this was open and transparent, wouldn't you think that they should tell the world? After all, that's taxpayers' money.
It's been said that the Highway Robbery Group, and previous to that, the Y Tower Road Group, was basically just a group of landowners that were not happy with what was being offered for their land under expropriation. How do you respond to that allegation and that accusation?
Well, there needs to be a change in the process of how they deal with land. And the land is land is land is land. All land is, you can't make any more land. It should be all the same price. If they're paying people $5,750 an acre, what makes your land less valuable? Why do they pay a developer $400,000 an acre? Why bring in 4 or 5 different appraisers and spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure out, okay, well, how much should we pay these people? And then we can get them to sign a confidentiality agreement so that they don't know what their neighbor's getting. How does that happen?
Well, that doesn't exactly sound like a transparent process to me.
Well, you look at the GTH, that was blatantly irresponsible for the government to, first of all, they only needed 54 acres of land for the west bypass. Instead of buying it from the nuns and paying what everybody in the area is getting, $5,000 to $6,000, they waited till a friend of the government who rents land to the minister of the GTH, like, it was just a coincidence, right? And he didn't even buy the land. He made an offer to purchase 4 times more land than was needed. And then he made $6 million just overnight. Didn't even go through land titles. And then you get another guy, another friend of the government, who just happened to come along and bought the land, 204 acres. And then Brad Wall, our premier of our province, signs an order in council in February. Then we get our premier, Brad Wall, signs an order in council in February 2014 to purchase 204 acres of land at 4 times more than was needed, at 20 times the rate that everybody else is getting in the area, and spending taxpayers' money, $21.1 million of taxpayers' money for land that was only worth $312,000. How is that even right? If you and I ever did that, what would be the first thing that would happen? They would handcuff us, take us, throw us in jail, and that'd be the end of it. But no, instead, when the story comes out, CBC did some great work on the story. The government sues CBC, so the story doesn't come out before the election, so that people didn't know what kind of government we're electing another term. That's highway robbery.
It was highway robbery. The biggest scandal in Saskatchewan's history. A bypass project